and welcome to the Week 9 edition of the Base on Balls podcast. I'm your host tonight, Cody. I'm joined by Paul. Paul, check in with you, man. Tough loss this week. How are you doing?
Yeah, this was a tough loss. Good to be on, by the way, Cody. Good to be on. Tough loss this week. Not nearly as bad as the loss last week, where it was decided on the final play of the final game. But yeah, the Tides have lost 2 in a row, and we've basically scored 700 points each week. So, I don't know if it's a team problem. Maybe it's just right now a scheduling problem. But otherwise, yeah, it's the season's going on. We're moving along. It's week 9 already in the books. It's crazy how fast everything's gone.
For sure, for sure. And glad to be with you tonight, Paul, talking it up as we're approaching, as you mentioned there, 9 weeks in the books. We have a 20-week regular season. So this week will mark the halfway point already. It's went by really, really quick for me. But we had some really couple interesting matchups this week. The first one that I want to get into, Paul, let's go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off, man. I think you versus Tita, that matchup, everybody's eyes was on it for most of the week. A lot of talk on main chat about it as the week unfolded. Paul, I'll let you go first, kind of analyze, vent, therapy session. What went on this week in your matchup with Tita?
Yeah, I dropped 400 points with my bats, 407 to be exact. Which last week against Bry, it was my arms that dropped over 400 points, and both weeks I take the loss. It sucks. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. 286 points from the arms. Pretty good, not great, even by my standard. My standard's always 300, so it was below that, and it was below that because of what happened yesterday in that Rays and Orioles game. I had Bradish going against Taj Bradley, and Bradish ended up with 0 points, and Bradley ended up with -20. If I get more of a pitcher's duel out of that game, kind of like I thought would happen, I probably win this matchup because I only lost by 47. So if they both drop, 15 to 20 each, that's like a 50-point swing, and that would have been enough to handle the difference. But yeah, you got to take your hat off to Tita here this week. He made obviously a ton of moves as he always does. But the one move, to me at least, that was the difference maker was he got Charlie Morton. I think it was yesterday, and we'll talk about it in trade section. But Charlie Morton came in and dropped 30 points today, starting at home against the Oakland A's. Usually when your starter's playing Oakland, you feel pretty confident about how that game's going to go. And it went well enough that, it wasn't the sole difference, but 30 points where he otherwise wouldn't have gotten any in a 47-point matchup, it's makes a big difference. But I mean, continuing with Tita, 364 from the bats, 374 from the arms. It's that consistency, it's it's really good. And Tita's team has been talked about this year, basically since he's been in the league. That's always a different team that you see every week in, week out. But for the most part, it seemed like he kept a lot of these guys for the full week, like Christian Walker. Alex Bregman just absolutely destroyed this week. I think he had like 3 homers in 3 or 4 games this weekend to close out the weekend. And it made a difference. So I'm not going to get too down on my team. I still like my team. 4 and 5 is not where I want to be. I'd much rather be 5 and 4, 6 and 3, somewhere in there. Especially given my schedule coming up after this coming week. But it is what it is, and we'll move forward.
Yeah, a couple of interesting things for me. The first kind of point to make is, I think the last couple of weeks we've kind of said, when Tita is moving these guys in and out on his team, and his team is constantly in flux, things can go bad. And we've seen that the last couple of weeks. And this week was kind of a result of when things go well. A lot of the moves he made, he capitalized on, and they turned out well for him. So, I think his record at 5-4 is kind of indicative of that management style of, with moving so many pieces in and out on a weekly basis. Sometimes that's going to buy him a win. Sometimes that's going to earn him a loss. I see him kind of living around the 500 mark, as we navigate our way through this season. And again, it's always hard to kind of break Tita's team down because you look at, the performances he got this week, and I'm unsure, is this guy even still on his roster? But as Tita moves forward, it's going to be the roster that's in flux, and it's going to earn him some wins, and it's going to cost him some L's. On the other side for Paul here, 693 points for the week, 407 offensive points. 8 times out of 10, that's a win. So another tough loss for the Norfolk Tides. Paul, you fought a 4-5. It's almost kind of tough to even imagine that that's your record when you look at your roster and you look at your points scored on the season. I think you're averaging about 30 points less per week than I am, and I'm 8-1, and you're 5-4 or 4-5. So I guess the schedule, maybe the second half of your schedule will open up a little bit. It's tough because now as we approach that halfway point, everybody's kind of getting to that point to where you got to kind of decide which way you want to go. And Paul, I feel like for you, your team really hasn't answered that question, because I think that you could find 10 reasons why you should go for a playoff spot and 10 reasons why you shouldn't. So I feel like your team's kind of stuck in the middle, regardless of how good I think your team is. I think your record being what it is, pins you in the middle. So, going to be curious to kind of see which route you take as the season progresses. And, I expect to see more wins for the Norfolk Tide as the season unfolds. Well, so we will move on now to let's talk about Bry's matchup versus the Oklahoma City 89ers. Bry wins 776 to 552. Difference of about 224 points there. Matchup was never really close. Paul, what did you see with this matchup?
Yeah, so 408 points from Bry's bats. When you get to the 400-point level, just like with my bats this past week, you're on a different level, in my opinion. And Bry's offense is on a different level. But more than that, he not only did that, he also dropped 368 with his arms. He had 2 negative point performances from his arms. One was James MacArthur and his blown save. I think it was against San Diego. And then one was a negative 3-point performance from Caleb Martin. Or Chris Martin, sorry. Chris Martin, Boston reliever. So when you're able to limit those negative performances, it really elevates your not just your arms, but your entire roster and as a whole. And really, that's kind of what Bry has done this entire season, and I commend him for it. He's got great players. Julio Rodriguez is finally starting to maybe kind of get it going a little bit. More so, not with his power, but with his legs, stealing bases, 3 stolen bases this week. But he hit 9 for 26. So when you drop 43 points in 26 at bats, that's a good bat, and that's going to carry you. If he can get that out of J-Rod, that'll be huge for him. But then for the other side, for the 89ers here, for Chad, it's kind of not been the season that we were thinking he would have just 2 months ago. And a lot of that's probably injury related, but the reality is most of the guys that we thought would be heavy contributors for him really haven't been. Like Wyatt Langford, he was injured for a lot of the season. Um, the other outfielder in Texas, I'm drawing a blank.
Oh
But
man, I am too.
yeah, but can't think of his damn name. Um,
Yeah. Oh my
Evan
gosh.
Carter. Evan Carter.
Evan Carter. Yes, Evan
Yeah.
Carter.
He's been down this year. I think he might have been sent down, or am I making that up? I might be making.
He's. I think he's on the IL.
Okay. So yeah, but he's been a disappointment. But in general, those type of people that we thought would be major contributors on this team, they just haven't been. And it's not to pick on Bracken here, but it's a little bit of what you get when you rely a lot on those kind of 22, 23-year-olds to be stars. Some weeks they'll be really good, and some weeks they're gonna not be good at all. And he's just been riding that wave. And then we talk about Reed Detmers. 3 or 4 weeks ago we were talking about Reed Detmers as a budding ace, and then he got sent down this week. That's kind of how it goes. Like it's a tough thing for him. I think he has enough good players to rebound, like a Paul Skeens. But I mean, even Paul Skeens he's only 22, 23. So maybe I'm not saying it's going to happen because I think Paul Skeens is very good, but maybe he gets a dud or two out of him and that changes the matchup. So for Chad, it's just riding the wave of the youth. I think his team will get better as the season goes on and as the future kind of rolls as well. But he's just got to keep riding the wave.
For sure, yeah. I think Chad definitely had some, and you touched on this, some young pieces coming into this season that rightfully so, a lot of people were high on, and they just have not worked out this far. We're 9 weeks in the season. These guys are players you hang on to for 8, 9, 10 years. So, I'm not knocking any of them, but listen, the production hasn't been there for a lot of guys, and it's kind of put Chad in a hole early on in the season. So, he is going to have to ride that wave of inconsistency with these young players. And for Bry, this is to me the most consistent, well-rounded team in the league. Bry may not. I mean, I think he's 8-1 right now. Does have one loss. He may catch another one or two, but this team consistently breaks 700 plus, approaching 800 almost every single week. And there are other top teams in the league. You talk about Jab, you talk about John Height, you talk about my team. Yeah, we can score 750, 800, but then we're, a week or two, you're going to catch us in the low 500s, the high 500s. Bry's team never does that. This team is well rounded, consistent, it's deep, it's balanced, it's great pitching, good relieving, and, a fantastic offense. So, to me, in my opinion, 9 weeks in, I tab Bry's the team to beat. He may aw shucks and say it ain't him, but looking at the roster, this is the team to beat as we kind of approach the second half of the year. So I expect more consistency and more really good performances out of the Rocky Mountain Vibe. So we will jump now to our third matchup. The Portland Sea Dogs just wiped the floor with me this week, 880 to 648. Paul, I'll let you go first, and then I'll kind of talk about how I felt navigating this week. But Paul, from an outside perspective, what did you see with this matchup?
So I have a quick question. 481 points from the bats. Has there been a higher point total that didn't have a cycle?
Oh yeah, John Height has broken 500 this year. I'm fairly confident.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
now it wasn't
yeah.
by much. I think it was like 508,
Okay.
510. But yeah, John Height has done it.
Okay.
Point being, your point stands though. 481 from the bats, ridiculous.
I mean, I clicked on this matchup and I scrolled to his point total for bats and I saw 41. My jaw dropped. Like that's an insane total. And count it 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12. He had 12 batters drop combined 481 points. That is just
Yeah.
crazy. Like Juan Soto, 83 points in 1 week, and he didn't have a cycle. It's insane. That is Jordan Alvarez, 64. Bobby Witt. Jab's got a crazy bat lineup. It's insane. I mean, because he's got the big names, Vlad Guerrero, Ketel Marte, Bobby Witt, Seager, Alvarez Soto. Like these guys are household names. But still, just to see that point total, it's like you think there's like a mistake, but it's there and it's real. Um, so yeah, that's not even getting to his arms where he dropped 399. He was a 1 point shy of 400 with his arms. Like, I mean, it happens when you get Luis Castillo and Bobby Miller or Bryce Miller, not Bobby Miller, Bryce Miller, the two Seattle pitchers. They both had 2 start weeks this week. So obviously that helps. But yeah, like his team just went absolutely insane. 880 for a total. You don't really beat that unless you have one of those things, no hitter, perfect game cycle. But obviously Cody's team's really good. It was the first loss of the season for him. He's going to hang his head. There's no reason to hang his head. His team's still obviously very, very, very good. Um, Freeman's very good. 371 from the bats, a very good total. 277 from the arms is kind of where his team dropped off. Camilo Doval had a bad week this week. And it happens. You have a reliever that blows a save, 2 saves, whatever it is. It happens. And then Jared Jones kind of came back to earth a little bit this week. Only negative 6 points, bad start this week for him. But yeah, like you can't look at these names, this rotation, this lineup, and be like, oh yeah, that team's definitely on the decline, because they're not, and they'll be back in the mix. Whoever they play next week, I think it's Connor actually. So yeah, there is potential to have a bounce back. But again, Cody's team is still at the top. Don't make any mistake. One loss isn't going to change anything for where this team's heading.
Yeah, for me, of course, I see this matchup. Tough loss, first loss of the season. Want to talk about my team, but my team's not the story. So I'm going to touch on kind of my thoughts with my team first, and then I'll go into the amazing performance by Jab this week. But I guess the good news is if you're going to lose, you want to do it in a week where your team looked decent. I would say 650 is decent without, some bad stream relief ads and Camilo Duvall blowing it this week. I would have been close to 700, which is kind of, where I think I should be most weeks. So, I mean, my team was what it was this week. But Jab's team was just too much. The matchup was really close for most of the week. I think going, Thursday, we were neck and neck. I was really feeling like I could have a good weekend. I could win. And I mean, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, Jab was just relentless. Like he scored 880. I'm pretty sure he scored over half his points over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It was just 160 point performances, 160 points. Just couldn't keep up this week. This is Jab's team exploded. Um, I know it feels good for him. This is what this team is capable of. And when this team does this, this is an unbeatable. No one's going to top 880. So great performance for Jab. For me, I'm kind of indifferent on where to go. I understand that my record is 8-1, but I'm really trying to compare myself to the upper echelon in the league, and I'm just not sure that my team can stack up against those teams. 371 offensively is nothing to hang your hat on. That's one of the best offensive weeks I've had in a long time. So I am happy with that. However, league wide, I feel like the bats have caught up to the arms as the season has progressed. And my team is showing that. My arms have went from, 450 point weeks to 280 point weeks. That's a major drop off as I navigate into this season, and I'm not sure how to make up for that because I'm getting good starts from guys. I've got old guys like Justin Verlander who's been really consistent this year. Young guys like Simeon Woods Richardson who's been very solid for me this year. Mitch Keller's been great this year. But then, I do have young arms that are inconsistent. And Matt Gore comes to mind. Jared Jones comes to mind. Logan Gilbert runs into some struggles. My team is just so pitching reliant to win that if I run into any struggles there, my bats just can't get me over the hump. So unsure about where I go from here, but I know Jab, everything is looking up for the Sea Dogs. It was a great matchup playing him, super competitive through the week, and then he kind of kicked my tail going into the weekend. But the Sea Dogs are definitely proving to be a force as we move through the season here.
Can I say
So,
something real quick?
yeah, go ahead, Paul.
So, breaking down the differences between your guys' pitching, your and Jab's pitching. He had 10 pitching wins this week compared to your 5, and he had 7 quality starts compared to your 4. So 10 to 5 is 5 times 6 is 30, so that's 30 points, and then 18, so 48 points. 48 points just based on pitching wins and quality starts. Though that's why, in my opinion, pitching is so volatile in this league. We put 6 points into a quality start and 6 points into a win. Like pitching, it depends a lot on the team that you have or the team that they play for. Because, like, for me, I know that Garrett Crochet has been like a very dominant pitcher this year, but compared to like a Luis Gill, also on my team, like Luis Gill, I know every start he makes, he's got a shot to win because he plays for the Yankees. Versus a Garrett Crochet, I know that at best I'm probably getting just a quality start and a very low chance to get a win. So I think that kind of factors a lot specifically into this matchup. Because going through your pitchers, obviously Gilbert, Seattle's been struggling this year to get wins, but he's a very good pitcher. Mackenzie Gore's on Washington. He got a win this week, but it's the same thing. Pittsburgh, you have Keller and Jones. Pittsburgh's not necessarily been a very good baseball team this year, so the opportunity for them to get wins isn't as easy to come by. So yeah, I think that makes a difference. Although I say that, but then I look over at Jab's team, Andrew Abbott, Cincinnati, Castillo, same thing with Seattle. Eric Fetty's on Washington or the White Sox. So yeah, I say that, but then at the same time, some guys get the wins and some guys don't, and it's very volatile. So I just wanted to make that point real quick. That pitching can vary so wildly, I think, between week to week. And it's not as much based on skill versus their own Major League Baseball team.
Absolutely. Very good point there. And we will move forward now to the matchup between John Heights, Yard Goats, and Connor's Sod Poodles. John Height won this matchup 740 to 524. Paul, what did you see with this one?
So the score, in my opinion, the final score doesn't reflect entirely how this matchup went. Connor was given John Height a match pretty much until about mid Friday evening. So obviously Connor's had a great year this year, I think, so far. I don't think any of us would be able to deny that seriously. But I think this is kind of more, at least currently, where Connor resides in that mid 500s to upper maybe 500s. So if anything, it was something of a disappointment, I guess, this week. And if you look kind of for the source of that, I would definitely say it's the pitching side. Under 200 points total from the pitching. And that's kind of where you kind of look at these guys like a Tyler Anderson, a Cal Quantrill, guys that historically have been, I guess you could maybe say, average. When they don't have their average to above average performances, that's where you see the point totals kind of suffer. I mean, his bullpen was okay. You know, a guy like Jeff Hoffman, I think he either got him or gave him away. Yeah, he gave him away late in the week, so he only got one appearance out of him. But you know, Hector Neris has been pretty good for the Cubs. I think he's kind of taken that closer role. So, you know, with Connor, I'd say obviously he knows what he's doing. He's been very good at kind of buying low on some under the radar guys, and it's definitely helped the long term prospects for this team. So, you know, obviously we've been talking up Connor, I think, all year, and I'd still say that he's on the right track. Maybe not for this year, but definitely in general. As for John Height, 423 with the bats. I don't know what else you can say. His team's absolutely insane. Aaron Judge has made an absolute fool out of me since I said maybe he was starting to decline. I think he probably had one of the hottest months of any baseball player in the last few years. Just the month of May was insane for him, and 80 points this past week kind of shows that. And he has really good names, you know, Lindor, Yelich, Ohtani, obviously. Only 22 points from Ohtani this week. But yeah, I mean, over 300 points with the arms, over 400 points with the bats. The early reports of the Hartford Yard Goats demise have certainly been debunked. And John Height's team is very good and likely will continue to be that way.
For sure, yeah. We celebrated in the Yard Goats. I guess you could air quote slow start to the season, but he's kind of shut everybody up. He's living in the mid 700s most weeks. Team is well balanced and complete, and going to be really hard to knock off the Yard Goats. And for Connor, yeah, you know, you're exactly right. This matchup was really close. As a matter of fact, I think as of I want to say Wednesday night or Thursday, I think Connor actually had the lead. Um, and then again, you know, the Yard Goats' depth and strength kind of pulled away over the weekend. And so, yeah, no, Connor's doing a great job in terms of teams that are rebuilding. He is by far the most competitive, in my opinion. Really, really, really capitalizes on going out and getting struggling players that people have given up on, and kind of waiting to see if they rebound, and if they do, he can use them, or if not, trade them for more than he paid. It's a good strategy, and it's worked really well for Connor. And so, yeah, you know, this is teams that are just at two different ends of the spectrum right now. This matchup kind of showed that, but I do think that Connor is definitely a competitive team in terms of the rebuilding teams. And I think that John Height is neck and neck with Bry for the top team in the league. So we will move on now and talk about Let's talk about the Beach Dogs win. They're back in the win column this week. Hen Dogs, Beach Dogs took down Dave's Red Wings 551 to 519. Really close matchup. I'm sure Hen's a little disappointed in the point total from his team. 262 with the bats, 289 with the arms. Not a ton to be thrilled with here, but he gets the win. Kind of spun Dave a little bit into a rebuild. Dave mentioned on main chat today that he's kind of doesn't see a lot of wins in the future. Going to kind of start rebuilding here. Dave's got decent bats. 343. He nearly outscored Hen's bats by 100 points this week, but the arms just did not hold up. A 176 performance from the pitching. So again, it's the tale that we talk about every week when we do this. The bats are there, but the pitching's not. Dave knows that. He's working angles to get the pitching where it needs to be, but it's going to take a while to get there. But really, really strong performance from the bats. And for Hen, yeah, you got to get some things right here. I know he's happy with the win. He's had some tough losses, so it's the luck is evened out here. He got a little good luck this week, but I wouldn't say that Hen should be like worried, like we're in panic mode. But I do think it's worth mentioning that coming into this season, he was a consensus top 3 or 4 team, and he's 5-4 and coming off a week where he got a win, scoring 551 points. So there is some reason to be concerned in Clearwater. Paul, what did you see with this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, since you kind of mentioned it at the end there, I'll start with Hen's team. I think there's definite reason for concern. Because he was that top. I mean, for me, he was the number one team in the preseason. My personal preseason rankings, I had him number one. And I know he was out of the country this week. I know he's on vacation. Well deserved after graduating this past week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. But yeah, I mean, I know he set his lineups, and I know it's you make a little bit of a difference when you set it day to day and you're able to be there in case somebody gets benched or takes a day off or what have you, a midweek injury, something like that. But 551, it wasn't, even if you managed it every day, it's not going to be like a crazy different point total. And for a team that should be scoring better, certainly better than 551, I think there is a little bit of panic because he is 5-4. He hasn't, shown that he can be that consistent 700-ish point team that Cody's slash Fight slash Bry, those kind of teams can be. So I think there is a little bit of reason to panic. But at the same time, Shota Managa has been one of the best pitchers in baseball this year so far and just laid an absolute egg against the Brewers this week. -14 isn't going to be what he produces. So, I mean, there's one bright spot. Chris Sale, same thing. One of the best pitchers in baseball this year and drops -6 this week in his start. So you're not going to get those performances week in, week out, and you will have, better. But again, like I look at this team and I like it, but we've talked about teams already this podcast that I think do have a clear advantage on their talent with their talent on their roster. So, Dave, it's a good segue into Dave's team that he's kind of mentioned that he's pretty much giving in for this year and looking to sell his top players. If I'm him, I'm looking up and down this roster and seeing who I can get. And obviously I want to get into it real quick, but I'll save it for the end. Like players that he could go after, Hen is like a Carlos Correa. Riley Green. I'm sure the price is going to be crazy high from Dave, and rightfully so on Riley Green. I think he's a great player, but like an Anthony Santander, Kyle Gibson has been pretty good this year. So there are players that Dave definitely could turn into a profit, and I think he's going to look to do that. But the one player I did want to talk about, Spencer Torkelson. So we laughed earlier this year, I think, for Bracton, that Nolan Gorman went 0 for 17 in a week with 10 strikeouts. Well, Spencer Torkelson this week went 0 for 16 with 9 strikeouts, and it led to him being demoted to AAA. Spencer Torkelson has been a guy that has been talked about routinely in this league as a very good player, and I think he still is a good player. Just kind of needs to refocus and recenter. But it just kind of goes to show you how this year has been across Major League Baseball, that these supposedly and should be really good players have been struggling, and some guys that you wouldn't expect have been flourishing. And it's just been a really weird year, I think, so far. And it'll be interesting to see if it stays that way and maybe becomes what everybody is, or if it maybe starts to bounce back a little bit and the guys that we know and think to be stars actually are them, and vice versa. But yeah, it's always good to get a win when you are on vacation, and it was a good win for him.
For sure. I know Hen is happy to take the W this week. We will move on now to talk about Smell's matchup with Homco. Smell wins 599 to 440. I know Smell's got to be happy, almost breaking 600 points this week. 308 with the bats, 291 from the arms. Smell, has really been kind of a place where arms go to rebound. Really good performances from Ben Brown. Spencer Arrighetti was strong for him this week. Hunter Brown in a 2-start week was big for Smell. I know he's got to be happy with that. And again, the goal here is to rebuild. Smell is still stockpiling draft picks and prospects and kind of positioning for the future. But hey, if you could score 600 a week while you're doing it, that's a good thing too. Got to mention David Fry's performance. 61 points this week. He moves into the 6th ranked catcher and a top 100 overall player based on our scoring. So really interesting pickup there. For Homco, man, the bottom feels like it's fallen out. 440, he got 270 with the bats, 170 with the arms. Homco's got a lot of work to do with this team. Last year I feel like we gave this team a lot of passes. I think this year we've been a little more tough on them. It's kind of about when does he decide to kind of blow this thing up? Because I think he's got good players, but for whatever reason, this group of players that he has assembled together is not very good. And so I think he can navigate this on the trade market and probably have a really quick turnaround in terms of a rebuild, but it's going to take a lot of work. So, Paul, what did you see with this matchup?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the bottom has basically fallen out on Homco's team. Just looking up and down, he's had injuries. He had some injuries this week, but at the end of the day, he still had 237 at bats total for the week. He had 4 home runs and 2 stolen bases. Homers and steals to me are kind of what separates the good teams, great teams, and bad teams. And you got to kind of pick it up in those 2 areas to me, at least one of them. And 270 is the result of neither area being picked up in. And like you said, he's got good players. Michael Harris, Jaron Duran, Nick Castellanos. These are good players. I mean, Alec Boehm. But, they're just not producing. And we've talked about it over and over on this podcast this year. I don't know how these guys just, they always seem to just be underperforming. And like you said, I think it is past time for him to try and do something about it. I think he will do something about it. I just don't know where he wants to start and who he's going to first. Uh, but yeah, like if it were me, I would have blown this team up twice over by now. So, but we'll see. Obviously, he's got a long way to go with this season. And we'll see what he does in this week and the few upcoming weeks. But then as for Smell, me and Smell have the same record right now. Which, if you would have said that to me a month ago when I beat Smell by like 400 points, I would have laughed. And I still can't believe it. Um, I mean, Hunter Brown is a guy that pretty much everybody in this league wrote off not too long ago, and he in 2 starts dropped 62 points. It's pretty impressive the turnaround that he's had in such a short time. Spencer Arrighetti, same thing, bandied about around this league, by me included, and he had a 41-point pitching performance. So, obviously a good player to build around for Smell. We know that Smell is rebuilding that, but when you're able to drop 600 points, just like Cody said, in a week, it's pretty nice to be able to do that and still consider yourself a rebuilding team. I do like the players that he's kind of acquired, probably as mainstays on his roster, and Zeke Tovar. Doyle has been pretty good for him from Colorado. So yeah, I do truly like Smell and where he's going. I don't know how sustainable it is for a full season, but at the end of the day, all you got to do is beat the team that's in front of you. And the last few weeks, he's been able to do that.
He sure has. So big congrats to Smell for, kind of being wrote off early in the year and working his way back. He's approaching the 500 mark. So it's going to be interesting if Smell's kind of faced with a decision. Does he start to buy a little bit and add some pieces to the mix? So it's going to be really fun to watch what Smell does. We will move on now to our last matchup of the week. Bracton's Larks gets the win against Scott's Flying Squirrels, 477 to 449. Bracton finished 12th in scoring this week, but came away with a W. Paul, what did you see in this bloodbath of a matchup?
Yeah, I won't get too far into it because we've kind of gone over already of what I wanted to, or what we wanted to get through in just this part. But yeah, I mean, Brighton gets the win, second win of the season. Scott's team has drastically fallen, I think, over the last month or so. Not too sure how he wants to proceed. I mean, I think he'll keep the boat afloat, so to speak, for at least a little while longer. But I can't imagine that he's been too thrilled with his team under 200 points with his arms. I mean, we've talked about it at length, but like arms is where it's at in this league, and Scott I don't think has it. A couple good ones, but overall, I very lacking in that department. And then for Bracton, it's the highs and lows of the young team that he has. I do like to shout out a few of these guys. Ryan Weathers has been really good since I gave him over to Bracton. Um, uh, what's this guy's Andre Palante, from the Cardinals, had a really good start this week. 32 points. Cody Poteet. These are guys that Bracton picked up out of free agency, and they did enough to get him a win. Is that going to happen all the time? No, it's not going to happen all the time. But in the meantime, it's been not the worst, I guess, for Bracton. I'll say that. It does stink that Christian Scott got sent down for the Mets. I know that Scott's been a pretty good pitcher. I think they're just trying to limit his innings. But, like I've said, that's kind of the territory you get when you have such a young team.
For sure, yeah. Want to give props to Bracton. Any week you get a win is a good week. I noticed he had some success pitching wise, 265 points. That may be, I'd have to look, but that's going to be up of close to his highest total from pitchers this year. And I think the difference is Bracton has kind of transferred in the pitching department. Instead of relying on a lot of young arms, he's really switched over to trading those guys away, having prospect arms, and just streaming his starts. And this is what can happen when you do that. He got 32 points out of Dakota Hudson, uh, 31 points out of Ty Black. Cody Poteet with a 25-point start, Andre Palante with a 32-point start. He took some chances this week on the stream market and it paid off and he ended up with the win. The bats at 212, that's actually pretty concerning for me. That's kind of been his calling card this year. Zach Neto is just not really doing much. Vaughn Grissom not doing much this year. He ended up on the IL. Stanton had a down week, 24 points and 20 at bats. The league is really caught up to Jackson Churio. I think his OPS is like in the 500s on the season. But again, those are the rides, highs and lows of these young guys. Jackson Churio is going to be fine. He's going to be a fantastic baseball player as he matures, but he's just a kid right now, and that's kind of what you have to deal with. Another thing that's pretty concerning is Ellie De La Cruz, 8 points this week in 25 at bats. I think he leads the league in strikeouts with 83. Again, though, Ellie's young. Ellie is going to figure it out. He's 22. He's a 5-tool player, but these kind of performances is what's going to happen when your team is so young. And for Scott, I agree with you 100%. Really nothing to be happy about the last couple of weeks. I know that he has been in a rebuild. I know he's been kind of patient with his team this year, but I think it may be time to start moving some pieces around and start planning for the future. So really going to be interesting to see, as we approach the halfway point in the season, who really declares themselves a seller. Because, as it stands right now, nobody really has except for Dave. Dave put it out there today that he's officially open for business in terms of selling. It's really going to be interesting to see, does Smell sell or buy? Does Homko continue to sit on this team or does he blow it up? Scott, is it time for him to make the moves necessary? Connor, what does Connor do? I know Connor's MO has been kind of getting struggling players cheap and then flipping them later. But, it's just going to be interesting. Paul, what do you think? Do you think some teams this week or in the coming weeks kind of announce that it's time for a sell-off?
I do think that will happen. As somebody that has done that in the past, before we had a bunch of new owners in here, and even last year. Last year, I set my team ablaze after 2 weeks, and I know that I still ended up making the playoffs. So I didn't do like, I guess, a full sell off, but I do, as somebody with experience in that arena, I do think it pays off to be one of the first to announce that you're selling off.
Right.
Because you then get all these owners that think that they are buyers and end up becoming buyers. You get their attention. You're the one holding court. You're the one that everyone's coming to, saying, okay, how do I get this player, and how much do you need for this? And they're more willing to do it when there's only one fish in the tank, so to speak. And then once you start getting more and more guys, like if you're late to the party in terms of, oh, it's week 14 or 15 or whenever our deadline is, and you're like, oh, now I'm selling. Well, the teams that are buying probably have already bought, and maybe they won't be as interested or willing to give up what normally they would be, because they are low on assets because they've already bought, or they don't have as many needs because they've already bought. Um, so I'm not saying, if you're a struggling team, I'm not advocating necessarily to just say, okay, I'm open for business, take all my good players. But I think right now is kind of that time. We're approaching the midway point for the season. Take a deep look at your team and kind of see, okay, where are you? Look at your schedule. Where are you going? Do you think you have a chance to buy to compete? Or if not, start maybe identifying guys that maybe are performing really well right now that you see maybe starting to fall. Um, Maybe try and trade those type of guys, or guys that you think you'll get a really good return for. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to tell people how to do their jobs. Obviously, everybody has very good experience, and everybody pretty much knows what they're doing here. But I think now is that time, though, especially with Dave today and what he did. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. But yeah, obviously everybody knows what they're doing, so I don't want to be that guy and lecture people. So
Yeah, no, but seriously, great insight there. I want to ask you right now, looking at the league standings, kind of the two divisions and where the records are. In your opinion, who are the buyers today? Who is, if you're a buyer, who are you competing with in that market? Who would you say is a buying team right now?
well, I would say the top teams. Like I'm not to put words in your mouth. You should be a buyer. Um, Jab, I think, is obviously a buyer. Um, Height, I don't know what he can buy with, but would be a buyer. And then obviously, I think Bry. I think Bry is a clear buyer. Because he has minor league assets, picks. He can buy a whole lot, depending on what he wants to do, obviously. Because I don't know, at least in Bry's turn, for Bry, for his team, I don't know what else he needs to buy at this point. I guess injuries can always happen, and that's when he buys. But to me, it's those four teams that are very clearly buying as of the end of week 9. Um, for me, I don't know if I'm gonna really buy or sell. I might just hold and see. I'm not really sure what I want to do with my team, to be honest. 4-5 is not what I thought I would be even 3 weeks ago. Um, so I it's hard to say for me. Fertitta against kind of a similar situation for Bry, or not Bry, John Height. I think he should be buying. I just don't know what he's going to be able to buy with. He doesn't have. I think he has 5 or 6 prospects. So it's hard to say. Um, and then Smell, I think, is the final wild card here. Um, at 4-5, it's a little bit of fool's gold. I don't think that Smell would disagree with that. I mean, he's got 4,500 points on the season. I think for the season, I think he's actually dead last in points scored.
He
Even
is.
even
Yeah.
lower than Becton. Yeah, which is crazy to have 4 wins and be dead last in scoring. Um, so I mean, do you trust the process there? and just kind of do what you've been doing and see if it gets you wins, but don't necessarily say like I have to go get wins, I have to make this playoff push. Um or do you? And you know, you have a base of 4 wins. Your team's won 2 or 3 in a row. And you kind of just say screw it. I'm going to go for it. Cuz he very much could. He has the ammo. Um but will he have the market to buy? That's, I guess, my biggest question for Smell. He has the assets to sell, to buy, I should say. But who's he going to buy from, and what is he going to buy that's going to put him above my team or Hen's team or Tita's team? You know, what's going to make him at the end of the year the better team?
Yeah, so for me, the number one buyer, I almost think should be Smell. And the reason why is, as you mentioned, 4-5 record, last in scoring. Okay, so obviously, as things stand, this team, as we move through with 11 more regular season weeks, probably not going to beat out a Paul, a Tita, a Hen for the 7th seed in the playoffs. Okay. But Smell has acquired so much draft pick capital, so much prospect ammo. If there is a seller out there, if there is a team that, Smell should be very selective, I think, in his buying. But I think if the right player gets put out on the block, he should 100% be the team buying, because he can take the gift of the 4-5 through the first 9 weeks, completely flip this team around, and end up as high as the 5th seed in the playoffs. So I think he has a chance. He's really kind of I don't want to say copy this, but kind of followed the Chad way of rebuilding, and I feel like he could pivot, like tonight. I feel like he could pivot off of that and almost put himself ahead of schedule above Chad, where Chad's kind of got a year jump start on him. I think he could really change things with what he's acquired, um, and really, really make a splash for the second half. Now, what you kind of to touch on what you were talking about with the market, when it comes to trades, the market's everything. And I think that there's always going to be room in this league for the kind of trades Tita makes, right? Where he swaps Mason Wynn for Jeremy Pena, or a pitcher for a pitcher, and and really what Tita's doing with those moves have nothing to do with dynasty value, have nothing to do with, oh, I like this pitcher long term better. Tita's looking at his matchup and, okay, well, this pitcher's facing the Yankees in New York, and this pitcher's facing the Marlins at home. So I'm going to trade. That's kind of how Tita makes it. And there's always going to be those trades in this league. But in terms of the big trades from a seller to a buyer, I'm not sure how that's going to work out this year, because the top teams in the league are not just the top teams in the league, but they are also like some of the youngest. When you look at Bry's team, and he's got all these superstars up and down his lineup, and they're all 25, 26, 27 years old. Bry really doesn't have a lot of incentive to go buy anybody. The team is scoring 800 points a week with what he has. I
Right.
mean, if there's no holes, what can he buy? You know what I'm saying? There's no
Totally.
reason to spend 6 prospects and 2 draft picks on a player that, well, I'm not going to start him over Ozzy Albies. I'm not going to play this guy over Rafael Devers. Now, injuries will come up as the season progresses that will create holes inevitably. But, I feel like I'm in that boat with my team. I can't I look at my roster and I go, okay, if players were available, I've gotten PMs today from a couple guys, Dave, Connor, Brackton. I'll sell. Who do you like on my team? What do you want? Kind of that nature. And I look, but really, to be truthful, I'm not even really going to their roster page and even looking, because what I do when people ask me that is I go to my team, I dissect it as much as I can, and I go, I don't even know. I mean, yeah, my problem is my guys are struggling right now. So, I take Austin Riley, for example. I'm not going to go buy a third baseman, because even if I do, and I know Austin Riley struggled, I can't take Austin Riley out of my lineup, because the second I do, he's sitting on my bench and he's going to hit 2 home runs. So, I feel like me and Bry are kind of similar in the terms of buying is very difficult for us right now. And I'm not sure how that market shakes out, because I just don't know that any big time players are going to truly get put up, for auction, so to speak, right? And I've noticed almost a change in the reluctancy to unload for those kind of players lately in this league. Just in my conversations with people, maybe trade negotiations that I'm not even involved in personally, but maybe they're asking my advice on something, and it's a bigger move, and I'm like, yeah, to get that guy, it's a lot, but to get that guy, that's what you got to pay. I would do it, and then they never end up doing the trade, and I'm just noticing. So I'm not sure really how this market develops. I think it's easy to say, well, this team should be buyers and these teams should be sellers. But as you mentioned, that market's really not there yet, and I'm not sure that it ever will be. So, for me, it's going to be really interesting to see who is there anybody, Paul? Let me ask you this. If you look at the records and you see the top teams, in my opinion, we have, as the rosters stand today, let me make sure. Yes, as the rosters stand today, I feel like the playoffs are already decided. Now the seeding will get moved around. Obviously, we've got 3 teams at 8-1, but in terms of those 7 teams, I think it is John Height, Bry, and Hendog, and then I think it's myself, Jab, Tita, and Paul. I think those are your 7 playoffs teams as rosters stand today. So, is there any one of those teams that, in your opinion, if losses start to mount up, a couple bad luck starts to happen, do you see one of those teams selling off? Because that's where the elite players are. That's where the selling market can develop, is if one of those teams sell off. Do you think one of those teams would, or do you think all 7 of those teams, regardless of how maybe the next 2, 3, 4 weeks go, still push and fight for the playoffs?
And so, in terms of selling off, like blowing their roster up, no, I don't think any of those 7 teams would do that. I think Tita is going. Okay, I don't think it. I know Tita is going to change his roster up. But I don't think it's going to be to get like 10 more prospects.
Right.
I think it's going to just be to move players around and try and just get in the dance. Because I think that's what Tita's about. I think Tita's about getting in the dance and rolling the dice from there. And I think that's a great strategy. I mean, getting in the playoffs, that's the goal. To me at least. Like your goal is to win the championship. Well, you can't do that sitting in 12th place.
Right.
So I don't think he'll sell off. For me, I've said it a few times this year. I don't have the need or desire to sell off. You look at my team. I mean, I guess maybe besides like a Seiya Suzuki or um like maybe a Schwarber, all my guys are like 23 to 28, 29. Like my team is young, but it's competitive window, championship window, in my opinion, doesn't even start until next year. So why would I further delay that by selling, a 27-year-old for two or three 22-year-olds? You know, like why would I do that? I wouldn't do that. Like I want my 27-year-old to be 28 or 29 when my 22 and 23-year-olds are 24 and 25, because that's when I can compete for a championship. So yeah, I might sell a few players here and there, like I've put on the block, like an Edwin Diaz, or some guys like that, basically. So in terms of selling off like a George Kirby, that's not going to happen. Like I'm not doing that unless it's to get, like a Hunter Green or like, a player like that. I'm not. I'm done doing the. Oh, let me get. I'm not okay. I don't want to say I'm done, but at least short term interim, like that's not my strategy. And besides me and Tita, like you're not doing that. Jab's not doing that. Height's definitely not going to do that. He's very much all in. Um, why on earth would a guy like Bry do that? The only other ones maybe Hen, but I don't see Hen doing that either. Like he still has the team of very good talent. A Pete Alonso, a Kyle Tucker. Like these are guys that why would he sell them off? They're in the primes of their careers. They're producing. I mean, he still has a good enough team that, barring, I mean, he's had a few injuries here and there. Obviously, Strider. Obviously, the Ronald Acuna injury is a terrible one to deal with. But why would he do? Why would he do that? Like why would he do this big sell off? Because he's in a similar position to me, where his prime guys are anywhere between 24 and 30. So this is his window. Why delay that and risk it on guys that, frankly, like prospects, there are no guarantees in the prospect business. I mean, the closest one is Paul Skeens, and he's up already and producing. So, like, why risk it on a 20-year-old that may or may not work out?
To that point, that's why I think Smell should be in buying mode
Oh,
because
100%.
he can have 35 draft picks and he can have 55 prospects, whatever the numbers equate to. And that's great and fine. And listen, if that's the only path you have to a rebuild, that's what you got to do. Like, I'm not knocking that path of rebuilding, but Smell is in a very unique situation with having that and then ending up, 4 and 5, dead last in scoring. He's in a perfect position to go out and buy guys to really flip this thing, this year. But if none of those top 7 teams that we just mentioned are selling, then he's going to be buying players off of, 3-6, 2-7, 1-8 rosters. Okay, all those teams have good guys, all good players. I mean, there's a couple in there, but you really start to question, are any of those players on those teams that would be potentially sold off even be impactful enough to take Smell from being 14th in scoring to 10th in scoring, 9th in scoring, 8th in scoring? That's the part that's so difficult right now for me is I feel like the league, we're all in this, we're all buyers, in a certain aspect, right? and there's really no sellers. And then if you say, okay, well, we can find 4, 5, 6 sellers, then all the buyers clam up and they're like, well, I don't have any holes. I don't want to buy. I'm not buying those players. And so the market gets real stagnant. So, I mean, to me, it's just super interesting to be at the halfway point, look at kind of how the records are, look at how the teams stack up and go, I'm not sure I see who is the for sure buyers and the for sure sellers, because it's almost like the players worth buying are already on those top 7 rosters. You know what I'm saying? And even like for you and even for Hendog, and kind of stuck there at 6th seed, 7th seed. You guys don't, I was talking about me and Brian not having a lot of holes. I mean, the same applies for you. You know your team better than I do, but do you have any glaring holes that you need to spend 5, 6, 7, 8 assets to fix right now? I mean, if I glance at your roster, I don't see them. You're deep in pitching. You've got a full, capable lineup of strong bats. You've even got depth on your bench. As a matter of fact, you got a trade block posted right now trying to sell off some of your depth. So, I mean, even a team like yours at 4 and 5, sitting in the 7th seed, tied for the 7th seed, you would think the Norfolk Tides is a buyer. What are you going to buy?
Exactly.
I mean, obviously, if an ace gets thrown out on the trade block, everybody's jumping on that. But outside of that,
Are they?
what are you? Yeah, well, I
I've
don't know. I
posted
mean, that's,
Luis. I've posted Luis Gill on the block 3 times in the last 2 weeks. I've gotten
yeah,
2 PMs about him. 2.
right.
So I mean, and Luis Gill is. I don't know that maybe he's not an ace like in the long term. Luis Gill is averaging 30 points a start. 30 points a start. And he's 26 years old. I mean, what are we doing here?
I mean, Paul, I think it's a reluctancy right now. And I think, and I'll get into that because you posting him feels very similar to my trade block post last night. Names like Austin Riley, Bo Bichette, Corbin Carroll, Walker Bueller, Camilo Duvall. I didn't get a single PM about a single player on that block. Austin Riley, Bo Bichette, Corbin Carroll, no one interested at all. No one interested in Luis Hill. I think there is a real. We had a couple of weeks there where guys like, and I'm going to be wrong. I'm not going to remember everybody, but Ellie De La Cruz was getting moved around. Shota Imanaga was getting moved around. Corbin Carroll was getting moved around. Really big name players was getting moved around early in the season, and the price tags were massive. These
Yep.
guys, I mean, people were paying huge price tags. I think people's reluctant to do that right now. Now you post a trade block with a really high end player. He's young, Luis Hill. Luis Hill's what, 23? He's a
26.
26. Is Luis Hill 26?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Still 26, prime age, pitching on one of the best teams in baseball. As you mentioned earlier in the podcast, he's going to get 6, 7, 8, 9 runs every time he goes out there. Oh, not to mention he's a 30-point per game arm. And no one but one or two guys is interested in that because the people assume they see his name, they know the price tag's going to be big, and they don't want to give it up. So again, that just destroys the trade market in terms of buyers and sellers. Now, I will say this. We are just going into week 10. So everyone feels like kind of, I still like my team. I like my guys. I think I can get myself, if you're borderline in the playoffs, I can get myself in. If you're Paul, if you're Tita, if you're Hen, you're telling yourself, listen, I got a good team. I like my players. I can jump from the 7th seed to the 5th seed to the 4th seed. I can work my way up. Those confident thoughts are going to dwindle as we get to week 13. week 14, week 15. And we start to look and, hey, there's only 4, 5, 6 matchups left. I'm 2 games back from the 5th seed. I'm sitting in the 7th seed. I'm feeling a little nervous. I got Smell down here. He's buying a little bit. He's knocking on my door. Now suddenly we got a real buyer. You know what I mean? So I
Right.
think the pressure of as we get closer to the end of the season will kind of correct that. But as it stands right now, I'm not sure that even though I see everything, like I said, I see the 7 playoff teams. And I don't think that changes. If I was going to bet $100, it would be on those 7, and I'm pretty sure I would win that bet. Those are the 7 that's going to make the playoffs. But that, what it's like, what do those teams do in terms of the seeding? Because seeding really matters. You want to win your division. You want to get that first seed. You get the bye when you get the first seed. You want to get the 2 seed if you don't get the first, because then you get to play the 7th seed in the playoffs. So I do think it can correct itself, but it is going to be interesting for the teams, to me, like Scott comes to mind, Chad comes to mind. If those 2 teams, to me, they are the 2 teams that I don't think are going to make the playoffs and have the pieces that they could post on the block that people would fight over, right? Bid up, raise the price on, there would be a huge market for. But you can also make the case that both those teams have incentive to sit on these guys. Like Scott, no reason to trade CJ Abrams, right? Why would he
Yep.
do that? Why trade Bryson Stott? But he does have Bryce Harper. He puts Bryce Harper on the trade block. I promise you there's going to be a fight for him, So really interesting to see, man. Do you got any more thoughts on this?
Yeah. So real quick, and on this, we can move on after this if you want. But you mentioned Chad's team as one of those 2, Chad's team and Scott's team. Take a quick look at Chad's roster and tell me who he's going to sell. Who's his Bryce Harper? Because I don't really see one. I mean, all his guys are kind of same thing. I mean, 22, 24, 27, 28. Like, who's his version of that?
He definitely doesn't have a Bryce Harper level guy, but you could make a case for Nate Lowe. You could make a case for Hassan Kim. Your point is correct. I mean, he's not going to sell Wyatt Langford. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's not going to sell Gabriel Moreno. He's, Luis Garcia, Jordan Westberg, Chris Morrell. But I mean, could Dansby Swanson be a trade? He's really struggled this year, but it's Dansby Swanson. He's gonna be around a 5.2 point per game bat. He's consistent. And I really do think that injuries play such a big role in this, because you can be chugging along and, Ozzy Albies tears his ACL and boom, suddenly you need a second baseman real bad, So
Right.
that always plays kind of a factor here. But you're right, the pieces for Chad to sell, Lance Lynn. We're not exactly going to fist fight main chat about who's going to get Lance Lynn. You know what I mean?
Like a Josh
So
Hader.
Josh Hader would be very interesting for him to sell off. Yes, that would
Like a
be.
Kirby Yates.
I don't know about Kirby Yates.
Right. Does he have that job locked down? I mean,
It doesn't appear so. I mean, possibly. I know that Bruce Bochy's been pretty flexible with the closer position in Texas. Kind of the hot hand. Um, but Josh Hader definitely. If he put Josh Hader up, there would be a market for that. But Joe Ryan at 27, would Chad sell him off? he would bring in a massive haul, but that's kind of a borderline case of you can make the incentive of Chad needs to keep him. He's going to be 28 next year. He's going to be 29 2 years from now. Chad is probably planning to be competitive in the next year or two. So,
Yep.
it is very interesting to see, and I do think that a guy like Scott putting a Bryce Harper's averaging 7 points per game. He is the second ranked first baseman and the 17th overall player. Bryce Harper would fetch a haul right now if he put him on the block.
100%.
Yeah, that would be a massive, massive trade piece. A guy like Ryan Mountcastle, really having a strong year, you could make an argument that Scott should kind of float him out there.
Yep.
Again, he's only 27, but there's reasons to be a little skeptical about Mountcastle, right? You wouldn't exactly call his career consistent up to this
No.
point. So maybe Scott, can capitalize on a guy like that. I'm looking down at Nestor Cortez. Scott should be shopping him, in my opinion. Michael King, shop him. I do think teams like that opening up. I'm gonna peek. I feel like we've left Connor out on this, and I feel like Connor's position in the league in terms of what he should do is really interesting too, because he's sitting at 3-6. Not great, but he's a game back from 7th seed in the playoffs. You're 4-5. You're tied with Smell 4-5. You guys are tied for the 7th seed. Connor's 3-6, and different from Scott, who's also 3-6. Scott's scoring in the mid 400s most weeks. Connor's scoring in the upper 500s, even breaking 600 a couple weeks. So if you're Connor, who is sitting on 36 prospects, and I'm not counting, but a ton of draft picks coming up. Now, most of them, all of them are 3rd and 4th rounds. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 second-round picks. Point being, Connor's got a lot of ammo to do some buying. So, what does Connor do? Does he keep doing this buy low, sell high thing? Does he buy low and sit on to be competitive? Or does he just sell off what he's got and continue to build for the future? What would you do if you had Connor's roster?
I think I do, at least short term, I do exactly what he's doing. Trying to get these guys maybe underperforming, maybe injured. I know his IL's pretty used up right now, but keep going for those type of players. But what I would do is see what happens like these next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm looking at his schedule right now. He plays you this coming week. He plays Jab after that, and then he plays Bracton after that. So he's got 3 wins right now. If he can win 2 of those 3, and I'm not saying he will because he plays you this week. That's a tough matchup. And then he plays Jab. That's a real tough matchup. I think he can beat Bracton. If he wins one of those games against you or Jab, then I'd start seriously considering buying. Again, we've talked about it for like an hour now. Who he's going to buy from, I don't know. But that's kind of what I would do: is stay the course, do what he's been doing. It's been working. For the most part, he didn't get the win this week, but it's been working. And see where it takes him. Because I know for me, losing stinks. I'm not a big fan of it, and I'm gonna try always to try and get wins. And he's been doing a fine job with that. I'm trying to scroll and see the rest of the schedule for him. I mean, he plays me 15, Plays you again. I mean, he's got tough matchups. I will say that, but the end of his schedule looks not too bad. This is bad radio, but yeah. So he plays Smell week 20. He plays Chad week 19. I mean, those two are winnable games, and then Bracton week 18. Dave. I mean, yeah, like he's the last 4 weeks of his schedule all could be wins. So he's got 3 now. Let's say he wins all 4 of them. That's 7. I mean, he has to get probably at least, I'd say, 10 wins to have a realistic shot at that 7 seed. I mean, that means winning 3 games between now and week 17.
Yeah. That's how close he is to being 500, finishing 10-10, and probably having the 7th seed or at least tied for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for sure. It is going to be really interesting to see what Connor does, because I feel like his situation, even though he has the same record as Chad and Scott, I feel like the situations are very different. And I feel like out of those 3 teams, Connor, Chad, and Scott, I think Chad sits. I don't see Chad doing a lot in terms of quote selling off or buying, right? Like I said, we're always going to have those. I give you Jeremy Pena, you give me Mason Wynn trades. But I mean, like true buying, selling. I think Chad sits, and I think Scott sells.
Yep.
Connor, I think it's completely up in the air. And, I go back to what we were talking about earlier with Bryce Harper. If you're I get what you're saying when you say I think he needs to keep doing what he's doing and see how these next 3 weeks go, maybe 4 weeks go, and then make a decision. But one thing that Connor can't control is when does Scott put Bryce Harper on the trade block? If Scott puts Bryce Harper on the trade block and you're Connor's team today, you've got to at least be PMing him about that, right?
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
I think so too. And I think Smell should be. I think everybody would ask about Bryce Harper except for Dave, Bracton, and Chad.
I was gonna say there's about if Scott put Bryce Harper on the block right now.
Oh, and Homco.
There should be like 9 or 10 teams in his PMs.
Yeah.
At least seeing if they have a chance.
Well,
But-
let's go backwards with Connor. Does Connor have a player like that? Does Connor have a player?
I was looking at his roster and just gonna say that I think a Paul Goldschmidt could do that. And so real quick before we get into players specifically, Connor's philosophy is rooted in becoming a seller. He has bought these high end names, at least, like a George Springer, a Randy Arozarena, a Paul Goldschmidt, Eugenio Suarez. He's bought these players at a lower than normal cost because he has intention to then sell those players. I would think,
Right.
at least. Or maybe it's because he wants to compete, and either way that's fine. But his entire philosophy has been rooted in flipping these guys for more talent. So if he's able to do that, if he's and Paul Goldschmidt already, since he's bought him, has become a better player than what he bought him at.
Right.
So yeah, like a Goldschmidt, maybe a Springer for sure. I could see being. I mean, again, the level of Bryce Harper, no, I don't know that exists on any team besides a contending team that's not going to sell. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely players like a TJ Friedel, like he could get hot and start going. an Ian Happ, he's been traded for a lot in the past. A Randy Rosarena, we've already discussed him, a little bit. These guys, Conforto, maybe we'll see. Yeah, like a lot of these guys that are injured or maybe underperforming right now. There are a few big names that Connor, if he does decide to go the sell route, he'll be able to get a little, something for sure. Maybe not not the Bryce Harper price tag, but definitely guys that he could move and get something for.
I found a name that's pretty interesting. We've talked about kind of saying Homko, his team has kind of put him in a position to where I feel, and you share those feelings that I have, is that he really has no choice but to sell. I think that is the only beneficial way from here is to sell. And I was looking over his roster, and yeah, he's definitely got guys that are going to be intriguing: Reese Hoskins, Gleyber Torres, Alec Bohm, but he's got Trey Turner
Yep.
on his IL. Now, I'm not exactly sure when he's coming back. I think they're saying sometime in mid to late June is when they're expecting him back. Trey Turner's a guy similar to Bryce Harper. There would be an all-out war for, in my opinion. I think that he could get a massive haul for Trey Turner, but I think if I'm Homco, I'm going to sit on that until I feel like the time is right. You know what I'm saying? Because I think if he throws up Trey Turner on the trade block in the right moment, he's going to get paid a lot. I think if he does it tonight, he may get 1 or 2 PMs. He may not get any. You know what I mean? Because, like I said, nobody's feeling desperate right now. Everybody's feeling like, hey, I got 11 weeks to write this shit, man. I'm good. I like my guys. I like the team I've put together. We'll see how the next couple of weeks go. But we move forward to week 14, 15, 16. Trey Turner is going to be super appealing to a lot of teams in this league.
Yep.
So that, the timing matters, but guys like that, those will be the ones that would come up on the trade block that would and again, a lot of these guys are going to get offers for, if Connor posts George Springer tonight, people's going to, there's going to be some interest there. But I think Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, those guys really stand out to me. I was looking at, really Sonny Gray that Humco's got. I know he's already posted him available. I'm really surprised nothing's materialized there. Sonny Gray's a 28 point per game pitcher right now. I mean, there's a lot of teams that could use a 28 point per game pitcher. So,
100%.
But again, no one's feeling desperate, right? Everyone's like, hey, like where I'm at, got a lot of season left. So, yeah, super interesting to see is like I said, we're approaching the halfway point. I think some teams are stepping up, some teams are falling back, some teams are kind of spinning their tires in the middle. So it's just really, really going to be interesting to see as everything shakes out. Who kind of rises up when it matters and who kind of falls back. So we will navigate now. Do you have any more thoughts, Paul?
No, I actually that was a good session. I think. I don't know how that'll go over with our listeners and people in the league, but I thought that was pretty informative.
Yeah. So for the people that may or may not be listening, there was some trades in the league this week. None I really thought was super big, so I just wanted to change things up a little bit and kind of talk about, where things go in the league, what the trade market's going to look like. So I did kind of change that up this week. But if you listen, let us know. Braxton's going to post this podcast. If you're listening to it, he already has. But let us know if you like that kind of back and forth session. Is we're always working to make the podcast better and more enjoyable for you guys. We know the trade talk is the biggest part of the podcast. That's what everybody wants to hear. What our opinions are of the trades that went through. But this week was kind of a definitely a slower week for our league, so I just kind of changed it up a little bit. But be sure to let us know kind of what you thought. But we will move on now to the last segment and talk about the Week 10 preview. A couple of really interesting matchups here. Paul, the first one that stands out to me, I'm going to say is going to be Bry versus Tita. That feels the most interesting to me. Paul, who wins this matchup and why between the Rocky Mountain Vibe and the Nashville Sounds?
Yeah, Bry's been riding very high, high as the Rocky Mountains. But yeah, but no, that was a horrible
It's late,
joke.
folks. It's
Yes,
late,
it is.
folks.
Yeah, I think Bry's gonna take this. His team has just been scalding hot. Tita's gonna make his moves. We all know it, but it it it's gonna be real tough, I think, for him to make a dent in this game. Tita, this is what I'm talking about. So I'll take Bry here. He's gonna be over 750 or around 750. Tita got about there this week. It's real tough to do that 2 weeks in a row. So I'll take Bry.
Yeah, for me, one thing I do not like doing is picking against Tita because, again, the team is so volatile. There's so many moving pieces, and listen, when Tita sees a Bry, myself, John Height, Hen, Paul, when he sees us on the schedule, Tita tries to win every week, but he's really going to be throwing it down this week on the trade market, throwing it absolutely down. That being said, I stand by what I said earlier in the podcast. Bry's team is the most complete team. It is the most consistent team. It is the most balanced team. I cannot pick against Bry. I think Bry wins this week, but it is going to be really fun to watch Tita pulling out all the stops. So we will see what happens. Moving on now, we'll go ahead and talk about my matchup. The Hot Rods take on the Sod Poodles. Paul, who wins this and why?
Yeah, the short answer here is Cody. Obviously you took your first loss this past week, and I don't think you've ever lost, at least in a long time. I don't think you've ever lost 2 in a row, and I don't see that happening this week. Again, I think Connor's going to give it his all. He gave it his all against John Height, and I anticipate that'll happen again. I think this might be close through Wednesday, Thursday. But your team's so strong, and I think it's gonna overpower Connor and the Sod Poodles. Certainly by Friday.
Yeah, I'm sure the consensus here is going to be, oh, Cody's going to win. It's going to be, listen, when I realized my matchup this week was over and I was taking my first loss, there was nothing I could do. This happened probably Saturday about noon after the noon games, and Jab got out over 200 points. And I was like, okay, nothing I can do here. I looked at next week and I was not thrilled to see Connor. But give him credit that he has changed that, because last year you wanted to see Connor on your schedule. This year that is not the case. At least it's not for me. And so I know Connor's going to be around 580 to 630. I would say in that ballpark. I know that's what I'm facing. My team scored like 640 last week. So I mean, yeah, I'm concerned, but I should win this matchup. I'm 8-1. I have no excuse to lose this matchup. but I'm definitely nervous to face the sod poodles. What is a sod poodle?
So sod is grass, and then poodle's a dog. So
It's
it's a
just like a
dog
grassy.
that, yeah, just a dog that likes grass.
Heck, well, Connor is a dog that likes grass, and I hope he doesn't like wins because I do not like losing, and I do not want to lose 2 times in a row. So we will move on and talk about Smell versus Hen Dog. Smell's feeling good, 4-5. Hen Dog's 5-4. There's a lot of implications to this matchup here. I feel like we've got the Beach Dogs that's trending down and the Chihuahuas that's trending up. Paul, who wins this and why?
Yeah, I think when you talked about Tita versus Bry is the most exciting matchup of the week. I think we buried the lead a little bit. I think this might be the matchup of the week. Um, Again, Smell basically has no business being 3-5 or 4-5, 4-5. He has
Four
no
and
business.
five, yeah.
He has no business being 4-5, but he is. And Hen has no business being 5-4. He should be better, but he is. So, I mean, this is a tale of two teams that are either better or worse than what their records are. And yet, if Smell wins this matchup, seeding wise, if the season ended after week 10, then Smell would be higher ranked than Hen, which is a crazy thing to say. There is no logical reason for it happening. And I've said all of this to say that I think Hen wins by 150. Um, I think he gets it done. I think he smashes the Chihuahuas. But again, I've thought Smell would lose like the last 3 weeks, and I think he's won every week. So who knows? Baseball's weird. It's crazy, and I'm excited to watch this. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'll say this. If Hen Dog loses this matchup and falls to 5-5, that to me, I mentioned when we talked about his matchup last week, is there panic in Clearwater? That at that point there is full on panic in Clearwater. Um, if he loses this matchup to Smell, it means he probably didn't break 600 points again. It means he was probably in the low 500s or lower than that. But if that was the case, it is really time for Hendog to say, hey, listen, I've had too many injuries this year. I've had too much bad luck this year. I've got to navigate. I've got to start looking at 2025. And I know you're thinking, what do you mean you'll be 5-5? He's 500. But listen, I get it. I do. But to me, there's some real horses at the top of the league. We thought Hen Dog was that. Losing this week to Smell after only winning the previous week because you won 551 to 517 or something. And being at 500, living in the 500s in total scoring, I think it's time for him to say, hey, there's not much I can do about 2024, but I can really position myself into 2025. And now that doesn't mean I think he should sell off for draft picks if he were to lose this matchup, but maybe focusing on younger, MLB ready players, maybe more what would be beneficial to Hen Dog rather than continuing to try to fight and claw his way out of some of the bad luck he's had. So you are right. This is a very interesting matchup because I think it could spin Hen Dog into a sell and it could spin Smell into a buy. So
Right.
everybody's going to be watching. I say all that to say Hen Dog's going to win by like 300 points. He's
Yep.
probably going to break 800. Smell's probably going to be in the 400s, and it's going to be nothing close. But I'm just saying this matchup does have potential for something really interesting. We will move on now. We will talk about Paul, your matchup. You get Bracton's Larks. They're coming off a win. You're coming off a really narrow loss. Paul, how are you feeling about this matchup? Who wins it and why?
Let's be clear. I'm coming off of 2 narrow losses.
That's fair. That's fair. You're right. Yep.
Yeah, I'm out for blood. I'm gonna smash the Larks. Let's be real. I'm not losing this matchup. I respect Bragton. I love Bragton. I think he's not doing the worst job. I think he's actually doing a pretty good job getting these assets that he's gotten. But I mean, unless Ellie De La Cruz is scoring 300 points, which watch now he will.
I was going to say, with your luck, Ellie De La Cruz is going to hit for 4 cycles this week.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah. So, I mean, as long as that doesn't happen, yeah, I'm taking this one.
I agree, and I don't want to crap on Bragton because you're right. Listen, there is some really high end youth on this roster, really high end prospects. He has really changed the way that he navigates this team, and he's really positioned it for a really bright future. But this next week is going to be rough. I think, Paul, I think you win big and get back in the win column and get back to 500. We will move on now to talk about the Yard Goats and Homco's Trash Pandas. I'm going to be quick. Yard Goats by 300. Paul, what's your thoughts here?
I'll be semi-quick. I agree John Haight's going to win. What I'm looking forward to this week is seeing, is Homco going to be that seller that we talked about? Because if he is, then I think it's more of a blowout. If it's not, I still think it's John Haidt by 200, maybe 250. I think he'll be around 700, and I think Homco will be around 450 to 500.
Yeah. With this matchup, I think what we're watching is, does Homco sell off, and does John Haidt? He's going to win, but there's still that reason, that question mark of inconsistency, right? Because he did have that slow start. Does it creep back in? Does John Haidt score in the high 500s, low 600s, or is he consistently in the mid 700s? That's what we're watching out of John Haidt's team every week. He's going to win 9 times out of 10 all of his matchups. But what's the team look like? That's the interesting part you're looking at when you see the Yard Goats play. Moving on now to the Portland Sea Dogs versus the Richmond Flying Squirrels. I just had to play Jab. Scott, just know you're in my thoughts and prayers this week, man. I'm going to take Jab by 700. Paul, what's your thoughts here with this matchup?
Yeah, it's going to be all Jab. Again, it's when Scott puts Bryce Harper on the block, that will drastically change, in my opinion, his weekly outputs, his weekly totals. But yeah, this one's Jab. This one's Jab by probably close to 300. This is kind of, looking at the schedule, this week's kind of been the tale of blowouts for the most part. So I'm sure we'll be wrong on at least one of these.
Yeah, but I do not think it will be that one. I think Jab's team is clicking right now. So again, Scott, we're thinking about you. If you need anything, reach out and let us know. As for the last matchup of Week 10, this matchup could be interesting too. It's 2 similar teams here. Dave's Red Wings versus Chad's 89ers. Paul, who wins and why?
Yeah, this will be a close one. Both of these teams, I think it's a race to 600. I think if one of these teams gets to 600, I think that's your winner. Yeah, this one's tight, actually. This one's a pretty good one, too. I'll take Chad simply because Dave has announced kind of his intention to sell off. And I think if he does that, I think that probably takes him out of the running to win this. Otherwise, I think he'd have a pretty decent chance. But I don't know what one win's going to do for Chad at this point. Or not Chad, Dave. with him being 1-8, getting to 2-8, what's that really get you? That's not to say I don't think he's gonna not set his lineups or anything, but I think Chad has more to win than Dave, and so that's why I'll take Chad.
Yeah, I think for me, if I didn't know Dave was selling off, I would pick Dave to win. But with that knowledge, and listen, Dave does have some pieces. I was just actually reading his trade block post. Eh, those are guys that he's probably in conversation with owners about. I mean, William Contreras is the number one catcher in baseball right now.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised if some of those pieces, we don't get some deals posted here in the next 24, 48 hours, and that would change things drastically. So I'm going to say Chad wins because Chad is actively trying to win. I know his team's young. I know he's fighting inconsistency, but he is actively trying to get the win. And I think Dave is, I'm going to set my lineups and come talk to me about my guys. I want to make some moves. So I will go with Chad as well. So very, very interesting week 10 on the docket. That will conclude the week 9 edition of the Base on Balls podcast. Paul, any final words as we sign off for the night?
Sod Poodles is the nickname of the Amarillo Sod Poodles, a minor league baseball team in Amarillo, Texas. The team's front office chose the name after it won a fan vote and named the team contest, beating out other options like Boot Scooters and Bronc Busters. So I know that Connor's listening. I think you need to do a throwback or like a City Connect, and just for 1 week have your team be the Boot Scooters. That's what
I really hope it's not this week because if he's the Boot Scooters, I'm gonna lose. I may purposely lose just so the Boot Scooters can win. How, as a fan, could you vote Sod Poodle over Boot Scooters?
that was a big miss.
That was a big miss.
Come on, Amarillo.
Yeah, but yeah, no. League is thriving right now. Really, really interesting talk tonight about teams kind of positioning themselves in the buyers or sellers market, kind of identifying who teams may sell, which teams may buy. But yeah, guys, if you're listening, be sure to let us know your thoughts on this podcast specifically. A little bit different there. Most weeks we will talk about the trades, but if you did like some other content or didn't like it, let us know. We do these podcasts for you guys, the listeners. Want you guys to be interested in them and enjoy them. Me and Paul, we do the best we can. I know John Hyde, Hen Dog, when they're on, they do the best they can. We've got Brackton on these things. Connor has helped out. Tita's been on a few. We all do that for you guys. We just want to give you guys something to listen, talk about, argue about, cuss each other out about, the good stuff. So, anyways, that is it for this edition of the Base on Balls podcast. We will see you guys back same place next week. Thank you guys for